Hey guys, tonight we're boarding a creaky old brigantine just as the pale dawn light creeps over the choppy waves. You feel the salted mist against your cheeks, and there's a smell, a potent mix of fish, tar, and, well, unbrushed teeth. You probably won't survive this morning routine without gagging at least once, but that's half the fun, right? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time down in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're drifting off. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the slick wooden deck, the sun just hinting at its arrival on the horizon. Around you, sailors stir from their hammocks, stretching arms that creak like old rigging ropes. Their hair's a mess, their faces are sea-weathered, and their mouths, oh dear. You can practically hear the collective stench of morning breath trying to escape into the fresh sea air. In the 18th century, sailors didn't exactly start their mornings with a minty toothpaste squeeze. In fact, you watch one sailor spit into the ocean after a big yawn and think, so that's the sea foam. Historians still argue whether these sailors really didn't care or simply didn't have better options. You pass a burly man who scratches at his beard and rummages in a small cloth pouch. He pulls out a hard biscuit and gnaws at it like a walrus tackling driftwood. He's using the crust to scrape the film from his teeth, a method so crude it makes you wince, but back then, anything abrasive was fair game. As the deck sways, you peek below at a sailor trying to rinse his mouth with stale barrel water. The water smells vaguely of moldy socks and has bits of unidentified, floaty things. You might recall your own last sip of tap water and thank every municipal engineer who ever lived. These salty mornings weren't entirely about poor hygiene, though. Sailors genuinely believed that if they survived the smell, they could survive anything. Jokes aside, their resilience was unmatched. Imagine waking up every day to a horizon of nothing but sea and not a single peppermint in sight. Sometimes, a cheeky deckhand would break the morning silence with a sea shanty, perhaps to distract from the smell wafting about. He'd belt out something like, "Blow the man down," and the rest would join in, toothless or not, creating a chorus that might have scared off a few passing gulls. This daily routine wasn't documented in many official ship logs. After all, captains preferred to record weather and cargo rather than scurvy breath updates. Still, we get glimpses from sailors' diaries and letters, often complaining about yellow crust or rope-like tongue fur. One sailor might brag that his breath could stun a shark, while another claimed he once kissed a mermaid. Spoiler, it was a buoy. Even now, historians still argue whether some of these stories were tall tales or half-truths shared to make the dreary life at sea a bit more entertaining. The sun climbs higher as a grizzled old quartermaster scolds a young deckhand for not clearing the barnacles from his gums. You almost feel a twinge of sympathy. Imagine starting your day being told your mouth looks like a ship's hull. As you wander, you realize this early morning ritual set the tone for everything else: how they greeted each other, how they sang, and how they carried themselves on deck. It was a slow, briny sunrise of shared suffering and secret pride. Before you drift off, remember, next time you complain about forgetting to brush one night, think of these sailors, bravely tackling hardtack crumbs, barrel water, and salt air with little more than a wink and a song. You shuffle toward the galley, half curious and half horrified, wondering what might pass for breakfast in this floating city of mismatched teeth and questionable hygiene. The cook, a wiry man with more scars than spoons, stirs a pot that bubbles suspiciously. You lean in and immediately regret it. The smell is like an overripe onion crossed with barnacle soup. A sailor beside you, missing two front teeth, chews on a piece of rope to strengthen his gums. Historians still argue whether this was genuine dental care or just something to keep idle hands busy during long, dull voyages. Either way, it makes you appreciate your dentist's fluorescent-lit office and tiny water sprayers a bit more. Near the galley door, another man drags a piece of frayed hemp cord through his mouth, scrubbing his teeth like they're a deck in need of a good swab. This method, inspired by early Chinese and Indian tooth cleaning traditions, found its way aboard European ships, though usually in the roughest, most improvised ways possible. Imagine your favorite floss commercial, but if the floss was dipped in fish oil first. As you dodge a splash of boiling fish stew, you hear the sailors debating whose method is best. One insists that biting into a lemon wedge daily keeps the scurvy, and the smell, at bay, while another swears by rubbing ashes and salt into his teeth. A third simply laughs, holding up a cracked shell he uses as a kind of tooth pickaxe. He jokes that if he digs deep enough, he'll find his dinner from last week. The older seamen boast of tougher gums, claiming they could chew through knots in the rigging if they really had to. You watch as one gnaws on a dried squid tentacle, using it like a chew toy. There's a kind of grim pride in this, a badge of honor earned from months at sea without even a whiff of mint. To pass the time, and probably distract themselves from the flavor of whatever was crawling across their tongues, some sailors hum sea shanties. You hear snippets drifting through the morning mist, heave away, haul away, echoing off the waves. The rhythm distracts you momentarily from the gnashing and scraping. As you stand there, a young deckhand rushes past with a pan of charred fish heads. He claims they make a good breath freshener, if chewed slowly. You suspect it's more about showing off to impress his mates, or perhaps trying to scare away any stowaway rats. Meanwhile, the cook offers you a wooden cup of murky water flavored with vinegar, used by some as an improvised rinse. It's sour enough to make your lips curl, but sailors believed it toughened the gums and killed mouth worms, an idea so horrifying you almost want to leap overboard. Among all this madness, there's a surprising sense of camaraderie. The men tease each other about who's got the worst breath, each daring the other to get closer to the captain. The idea that these rough methods kept spirits up might sound strange today, but when you're weeks from shore, anything to pass the time becomes a small treasure. You think back to that man scraping his teeth with hemp. Later, you'll see him share the same rope with another sailor. Hygiene rules were certainly different on these decks. Historians still argue whether these habits did more harm than good, or if the social bonding outweighed the dental downsides. You feel the ship sway gently, like a mother rocking a stubborn toddler. A gull squawks from above, probably wondering what those humans are up to, grinding ropes and shells into their mouths like deranged seagulls themselves. As you drift further into this scene, it dawns on you, this was their daily normal. They didn't dream of toothbrushes with colorful bristles or electric buzzing gadgets. They had ropes, ashes, squid tentacles, and pure willpower. And somehow, that was enough to keep them going. You move on from the galley, feeling a little salter, a little braver, and a lot more grateful for your next minty bedtime brush. You shuffle down the narrow passageway of the ship, ducking your head as you pass under low beams smeared with lamp soot. The air smells like tar, sweat, and a touch of sour fish, a fragrance that would never sell in modern perfume stores. In the corner, a few sailors are gathered around a small barrel, passing around a mysterious mixture that looks suspiciously like ground-up seashells and ash. One of them proudly explains that this is their tooth powder, made from whatever they could scrape off the deck or collect from crushed coral. Historians still argue whether these powders genuinely helped keep teeth clean or simply gave sailors something to brag about between shifts. Either way, you can't help but imagine the gritty crunch on your own molars. Nearby, a sailor demonstrates how he uses the mixture, dipping a chewed stick, his makeshift toothbrush, into the powder before vigorously scrubbing. The stick is frayed at the end, resembling a ratty paintbrush that's seen better days. He claims it gives his gums a pleasant burn, which sounds suspiciously like marketing spin for something no dentist would recommend. Another sailor laughs and says he prefers smoke washing. He lights a pipe and insists that the heat from the smoke sterilizes his mouth. You watch as he puffs away with confidence, each exhale sending curls of gray mist toward the ceiling. You half expect a tobacco fairy to appear and grant him magically perfect teeth. But no, he just ends up with stained gums and the breath of a chimney sweep. Suddenly, a young cabin boy bursts through, carrying a ragged piece of dried kelp. He's grinning ear to ear, claiming that chewing the kelp helps remove tartar. You watch him tear at it like a determined goat. Some historians still argue whether sea vegetables were truly beneficial or if sailors simply enjoyed gnawing on something vaguely green after endless salted meat. Next to him, an older sailor carefully rubs his teeth with a mixture of vinegar and crushed peppercorns. He mutters that the combination wakes the spirit and scares off scurvy ghosts. You can't help but chuckle. The logic feels about as sturdy as a one-legged barrel, but the confidence is undeniable. The captain passes by, inspecting the scene with a stern eye. You'd think he might enforce some sort of dental uniformity, but he merely grunts and heads toward his quarters, perhaps too preoccupied with plotting courses and rationing rum to worry about oral hygiene experiments happening below deck. There's a bizarre charm in watching these men share tips and argue over whose method is less revolting. They clink their tin cups together, laugh through missing teeth, and complain about the burning vinegar breath they get after the peppercorn treatment. You sense that each new concoction and cleaning ritual is part science, part superstition, and part sheer boredom relief. Above deck, you catch a glimpse of a lookout gnawing on a charred piece of driftwood. He claims it's smoked tooth bark, a personal innovation inspired by an old tale from an island shaman. Whether it actually helped or not is another matter entirely. Historians still argue whether these island stories influenced sailor hygiene or were just sailor jokes taken too seriously. As waves slap gently against the hull, you hear the wind whistle through the rigging, adding an oddly calming background soundtrack to the sailors' chaotic dental routines. You can almost imagine the rope-like floss twirling in the breeze like a twisted sea banner. The whole scene feels like a living, breathing testament to human ingenuity, or human stubbornness, depending on your perspective. Every sailor had his own method, and each swore it was the only thing keeping him from losing all his teeth to the sea. You move on, eyes wide with equal parts admiration and horror, thinking about how you might never complain about minty mouthwash again. You step carefully over a coil of rope, following the sound of clinking metal cups and muffled laughter. Down in the galley, a small group of sailors are engaged in what looks like a culinary experiment gone terribly wrong. A pot of something thick and black bubbles gently over a low flame, giving off a smell that could wake the dead, or send them running. A burly cook with soot on his cheeks stirs it proudly. He calls it tar paste, a blend of burnt bread crumbs, soot, and seawater, sometimes spiced with crushed nutmeg if they were lucky enough to raid the spice stores. He claims it works wonders on teeth, though historians still argue whether it actually prevented tooth decay or simply created new kinds of mouth ulcers. Nearby, a lean, wiry sailor demonstrates his preferred toothbrush, a piece of horsehair tied to a stick. It flops around like a seaweed tentacle, but he insists it tickles the molars just right. You can't help but imagine a modern dentist fainting at the sight. The man's grin reveals more gaps than actual teeth, and yet he beams as though he's the poster boy for toothpaste ads. Across from him, another sailor is chewing furiously on a piece of old rope dipped in salt water. He swears this method keeps the gum strong and helps him bite through ship biscuits without screaming. You remember the ship biscuits, harder than cannonballs and more crumbly than your willpower on a Monday morning. At the edge of the group, an old man with sun-leathered skin dips his fingers in a mysterious blue powder made from ground lapis lazuli. He claims it was a gift from an exotic trader in the Indies and that it holds magical cleansing powers. Historians still argue whether this powder actually had antiseptic properties or if it was simply another example of sailors being sailors, blending myth and necessity with a pinch of boredom. A young deckhand, eyes wide with wonder, tries to imitate the older sailors by rubbing ashes from the cook's stove directly onto his teeth. The resulting squeak sounds like a violin string being plucked badly, and you can't help but chuckle. The older sailors shake their heads and share a knowing look, as though welcoming him into the eternal fraternity of questionable maritime self-care. One sailor starts humming a shanty about teeth lost to the sea, a slow, mournful tune that somehow turns into a raucous chorus about grog before the verse ends. You watch as the group bursts into laughter, sloshing their cups and slapping each other on the back. For them, dental hygiene isn't just about health, it's a group ritual, a strange bonding moment that makes the endless months at sea a little less unbearable. Meanwhile, above deck, you notice a solitary figure carving a toothpick from a seagull feather. He claims it slides better between teeth than a knife through butter. You suspect he might have just been bored and looking for an excuse to whittle something, but he holds it up with pride like he's unveiling a priceless artifact. Evening falls, painting the sea in soft streaks of violet and rose. The sailors begin to quiet down, slipping into their hammocks or leaning against barrels, chewing the last of their rope or horsehair brushes in the waning light. You hear one last joke echo across the deck: "At least we won't be kissing any mermaids tonight, so who cares how we smell?" You can't help but smile as you tuck that image away, a little more grateful for your own toothbrush at home, safe, minty, and mercifully free of tar or ashes. You shuffle toward the ship's galley, that chaotic little kitchen at sea where culinary dreams go to drown in salted pork and spoiled lemons. Here, you catch sight of the cook, probably half asleep and muttering curses in 17 different dialects, chopping away at what might be cabbage, or a weirdly shaped sock. You can practically smell the rank combination of bilge water and rotting onions. You grab a biscuit that is so hard it could double as a weapon if pirates ever showed up. But aside from those rock-like biscuits, sailors prized salted meat, often pork or beef, preserved within an inch of its life in barrels. The smell alone could scare off most rats, though historians still argue whether it scared off scurvy too. You gnaw on a piece, feeling like you're chewing on a salty boot. They believed the salt would keep the meat edible for months, and, sometimes, it did. Other times, sailors found strange green fuzz that was less herb garnish and more free petri dish. Here's the twist: those same briny barrels of meat sometimes doubled as makeshift storage for toothbrush substitutes. Chew sticks and fibrous bones found in these barrels were repurposed for dental cleaning. You imagine pulling out a beef rib, scraping it over your teeth, and hoping no one judges you. The taste? Probably like licking a salt mine. As you scrape and gnaw, you glance over at your bunkmate furiously brushing with a piece of frayed rope. Yes, rope. Sailors had no shame. They'd twist rope fibers into something resembling a brush, soak it in salt water, and rub away. It's like a primitive electric toothbrush, minus the battery and plus about 5 diseases. Meanwhile, the cook starts a game of dice with a passing deckhand, betting extra soup rations and a surprisingly clean spoon. You join in, rolling ancient wooden dice that look like they've been gnawed by sharks. A soft cheer erupts as someone wins a spoonful of mysterious brown sludge, a prize or a punishment? Hard to say. Historians still argue whether sailors genuinely believed these makeshift brushes helped or if it was simply a desperate attempt to feel human amid the constant stench of sweat, fish, and tar. Records suggest some captains encouraged it to keep morale up. After all, no one wants to smell someone else's breath in cramped hammocks. While you chew that last rock biscuit chunk, you overhear an older sailor reciting sea shanties about the girl with teeth like barnacles. You shudder, partly from the tune and partly from realizing that your own teeth might be headed that way if you skip your rope brush session tonight. You lean against a barrel, your head spinning with the sweet aroma of spoiled beer and boiled cabbage. Despite the discomfort, you find a weird pride in your new toothbrush skills, a badge of honor among the sea's roughest. Tomorrow, you might try the chew stick again, maybe even experiment with some leftover rum for a more luxurious rinse. And so you drift back to your bunk, mouth oddly fresh, mind buzzing with dice games, sea ballads, and questionable hygiene experiments. You try not to think about the green fuzz on the meat or whether your new chew stick once belonged to the ship's resident goat. Remember that donkey milk face cream from the Roman baths? Imagine adding a salty meat bone toothbrush to that spa day package. History, you realize, is just a series of odd product trials that somehow got us to toothpaste in a tube. You slump onto your hammock, swaying gently with each new creak of the ship's ribs, and your mind drifts to what else these sailors did to keep themselves feeling somewhat clean. You look down at your makeshift toothbrush, perhaps a splintery bone or a sea-worn piece of driftwood, and wonder, how did they clean their mouths when even fresh water was scarce? As the moonlight filters through the tiny porthole, you notice a deckhand working on his teeth with what appears to be an actual twig, gnawed into a brush-like tip. It turns out, chew sticks weren't just for land dwellers. Sailors, ever resourceful, adapted whatever they found. In Asia and the Middle East, twigs from neem or miswak trees were common, but for 18th-century sailors in the Atlantic, they'd settle for anything fibrous, even salty ropes or soft pine twigs stripped of bark. Historians still argue whether sailors actually believed these twigs could prevent scurvy or if it was more of a superstition handed down from older mariners with more gaps than teeth. You can almost hear the deck gossip: chew on this stick long enough and you'll keep the devil away from your gums. While you scrape away at your teeth, someone passes by carrying a bucket of lumpy stew, sloshing suspiciously onto the floorboards. It smells like a fever dream of turnips and mystery fish. You consider whether any of that goop would make an effective toothpaste if you were desperate enough. Some sailors did use ashes or crushed seashells as abrasive scrubbers, a gritty exfoliation for the mouth, if you will. Imagine waking up each morning to rub clam powder across your molars. You'd certainly be more awake afterward. Nearby, a young sailor hums a sea shanty about a lost love in Lisbon while dipping his stick into strong, sour vinegar. Yes, vinegar. Sailors believed it could kill mouth rot. You try to imagine swirling vinegar around your gums while the ship pitches and rolls beneath your feet. It's enough to make your tongue hide behind your teeth in terror. You take another glance at the older sailor who swears by his salted pork bone, proudly declaring it keeps his breath as fresh as a sea breeze. You hold back a laugh. You've smelled that breeze, and it's not exactly minty. The moon outside has shifted, casting ghostly shapes on the wooden planks. You feel like you're floating in a salty, squeaky cradle, every sway a gentle reminder of your oceanic reality. Someone starts playing a fiddle nearby, and for a brief moment, it almost feels like a midnight dance hall instead of a damp ship. You rub your eyes and try to imagine your land-based friends brushing with delicate horsehair brushes or maybe even using sponges soaked in rosewater. Meanwhile, you're here with your vinegar-soaked chew stick and salty beef ribs. You start to feel a weird kinship with your fellow sailors, a brotherhood of questionable dental choices. As you finish your nightly dental ritual, you tie the stick onto your belt for safekeeping. You wouldn't want to lose your prized tooth tool to a sudden wave or a sticky-fingered cabin mate. You finally lie back, arms crossed behind your head, humming along to the fiddle. The salty air fills your lungs as you imagine all the countless sunsets and foreign shores ahead. You think of your teeth gleaming in the lantern light, probably still coated in brine and vinegar, and you wonder if one day, future historians will argue over whether these nightly rituals were effective or just a sign of human stubbornness. Tomorrow, you might try adding charcoal to your cleaning routine. It's supposed to draw out impurities, after all. But for now, you close your eyes, teeth tingling from your primitive cleanse, and drift into the rhythm of waves knocking softly against the hull. As you drift into a half-sleep, the ship creaks like an old man's knees, and you can't help but think about what else the sailors did to keep themselves, and their teeth, in somewhat working order. You wake to the smell of tar and old rope, your chew stick still tucked by your side like a loyal pet. You sit up, rubbing your eyes, and hear the low murmur of a sailor reciting an odd rhyme to remember his oral hygiene steps: brush with stick, rinse with brine, chew a clove, and you'll be fine. Historians still argue whether cloves really did help sailors keep their teeth healthy or if they were simply used to mask the stench of rotting gums. Cloves were sometimes chewed or even wedged between aching teeth as a primitive painkiller. It wasn't exactly a dentist's chair with soothing music, more like a game of, will this kill me or not? You stumble to the deck, where a few sailors are trading gossip about ports they'll never see and tavern brawls they barely remember. Someone passes you a handful of crushed charcoal, insisting it works wonders on plaque. You smirk. There's a certain mad bravery in trusting black soot to brighten your smile, but that's 18th century innovation for you. A seagull cries overhead, reminding you that somewhere out there is dry land with real toothbrushes and maybe even peppermint paste. But here, aboard this bobbing wooden beast, you've got vinegar, ash, and whatever you can chew on without losing a tooth. You remember a young deckhand who used gunpowder mixed with lemon when the ship ran out of vinegar. The result? His gums looked like a battlefield, but he claimed it was invigorating. Below deck, an older sailor proudly displays a small leather pouch filled with herbs, mint if he's lucky, or sometimes bitter wormwood. He waves it like a holy relic, explaining it keeps the evil spirits from gnawing on his molars at night. You nod politely, trying not to imagine ghostly creatures crawling around your mouth while you sleep. The rocking of the ship feels hypnotic tonight. A candle flickers on a nearby barrel, throwing long shadows that dance like drunken skeletons. You can almost hear your mother's voice from childhood, warning you to brush properly or else. If only she could see you now, scrubbing with salted ash like a half-mad pirate. There's a certain poetry to these seafaring rituals, half survival, half superstition, all flavored with salt and desperation. You trace your tongue across your teeth, feeling the roughness left by the ash. You wonder how anyone on this ship managed to charm a sweetheart at the next port. Maybe they didn't bother. Maybe a roguish grin and a few coins were enough. You pass a barrel where two sailors argue whether chewing on hardtack helps scrape off plaque. One insists it's better than any twig, the other claims it's just an excuse to gnaw on ship rations meant for emergencies. You watch them debate with a kind of sleepy amusement. Hardtack, simultaneously bread, weapon, and, apparently, dental aid. The stars overhead shimmer like sugar crystals, and the air feels almost sweet if you squint past the scent of sweat and brine. You hear the distant echo of a fiddle again, luring your mind into softer places. You lean against the railing, letting the salty wind whip through your hair, and imagine all the different ways sailors must have invented to keep their teeth from mutinying. Tomorrow you might try that trick with citrus peels, rumored to whiten teeth and scare away scurvy. Historians still argue whether it worked or if sailors just liked the tang. You sigh, drifting further into that delicious, drowsy state where even vinegar starts to sound refreshing. Your eyes grow heavy, your heartbeat matches the sway of the waves, and you find a strange comfort in knowing you're part of an ancient line of humans just trying not to lose all their teeth before landfall. You take one last sleepy bite of your chew stick and let the night claim you. You wake before dawn to the sound of groaning wood and the gentle lap of waves against the hull. The ship is still your entire world, stretching in every direction with nothing but endless sea beyond. You reach for your chew stick again, feeling its rough, fibrous surface against your tongue, your most loyal, albeit splintery, companion. You shuffle toward the galley, where the cook is humming a bawdy tune while stirring a pot of something suspiciously gray. You overhear him explaining to a young deckhand that rubbing sage leaves on your teeth can freshen breath and toughen gums. Historians still argue whether sage truly held such magical dental properties or if sailors just like to chew anything green after months of salted beef and biscuit. Sage wasn't the only green remedy. You catch another sailor pinching mint from the cook's stores, insisting it makes his mouth feel as fresh as a May breeze in Portsmouth. You nearly snort out your first laugh of the day. The thought of a breath so clean it could remind anyone of spring feels almost mythical aboard this floating stew of sweat and salt. As you lean against a barrel, another sailor proudly displays his secret weapon, a frayed piece of horsehair tied to a stick. It's the closest thing to an actual toothbrush on the ship, though it resembles a sad broom more than any modern dental tool. You watch him scrub with such determination, as though he's scraping barnacles off the hull of a ship rather than plaque from his molars. Someone else swears by crushed seashell powder, which supposedly polishes teeth to a pearly glow. You imagine the grit squeaking against enamel, wincing at the thought. Still, the sailor flashes a grin so wide it might frighten a shark. You wonder if his teeth are actually cleaner or just decorated with the stubborn white dust of crushed oyster. Your mind drifts to a memory, a sailor from a Portuguese vessel who insisted on carrying a small tin of burnt rosemary ash. He called it his midnight armor, claiming it protected him from evil spirits and toothaches alike. You recall the smell, smoky, earthy, a little like a campfire after rain. It wasn't pleasant, but out here, anything that gave comfort was worth its weight in rum. Nearby, A sailor knots a rag soaked in vinegar and salt, rubbing it along his gums like a medieval warrior anointing his sword. Historians still argue whether this ritual had any actual merit or if it was a hopeful hedge against inevitable tooth loss. You can almost feel the sting as you watch him wince, though he quickly wipes away tears and flashes a defiant smile at his mates. The first pink blush of dawn spreads over the horizon like spilled paint, and you start to notice the pale outlines of gulls circling overhead. Somewhere, beyond this watery expanse, people brush with minty paste and rinse with cool, fresh water. The absurdity of using seashell dust and vinegar feels like a private joke shared among the stars. A deckhand starts playing a sea shanty on a fiddle, the melody lilting and mournful. You sway along, your chew stick tapping gently against your teeth like a tiny drumstick. You imagine the sailors centuries from now, laughing at your methods, marveling at the grit and resourcefulness it took to keep a single tooth intact on a months-long voyage. You chuckle at the memory of an old sailor explaining how the bristles from pig necks were sometimes used when horsehair was unavailable. According to him, it added an earthy flavor to his routine. You're not sure what's worse, sea-soaked horsehair or salty pig bristle. As the sun creeps higher, the deck bustles with sailors tightening ropes and checking sails, each man clutching his personal oral survival kit, ash, vinegar, mint, horsehair, or the humble chew stick. You feel oddly bonded to them, all warriors in a silent battle against decay. You lean your head back and close your eyes, the fiddle's tune weaving through your sleepy thoughts. You taste a faint tang of vinegar on your lips and imagine mint leaves growing wild somewhere on shore, waiting to be chewed by someone who has never known the sting of brine. With each gentle sway of the ship, you feel the boundary between waking and dreaming grow softer, as if the sea itself is whispering you back to sleep. You sigh, a long, slow exhale that carries away the salt, the ash, the horsehair, leaving only the gentle promise of another dawn. You find yourself wandering the deck after another rough night of half-sleep, still gnawing on that same chew stick like a loyal dog with an old bone. The sun has just begun its climb, painting the horizon in watercolor shades of peach and lavender. A few sailors, equally bleary-eyed, gather around a barrel of rainwater, their morning ritual of rinsing out last night's dreams. As you dip your hands into the cold water, you notice one sailor pulling out a small bundle wrapped in oiled cloth. He reveals a surprisingly delicate bamboo brush with boar bristles tied tight to one end. It's a prized possession, passed down from a visiting Chinese trader years ago. Historians still argue whether these brushes truly inspired European dental hygiene trends, or if they were just novelty curiosities among sailors with more gold teeth than real ones. You watch as he dips the bristles in a muddy gray paste he claims is made of crushed charcoal and ground salt. The sailor boasts that it polishes like a ship's hull before a royal inspection, though you suspect it might taste like licking a fireplace. You can't help but admire his dedication, even if his breath probably resembles a chimney sweep's day off. Not far away, another deckmate crushes dried cloves between his teeth, releasing an intense aroma that dances across the salt-laden air. He winks at you, explaining that cloves numb the gums and fight tooth pain. You nod politely while suppressing a shudder at the idea of a mouthful of spicy splinters first thing in the morning. Your mind drifts to those back home, on firm ground, brushing their teeth with minty concoctions in warm candlelight. Meanwhile, you're here, standing next to a man who's now gargling brine water mixed with a hint of moonshine, a DIY rinse that's as bold as it is questionable. Historians still argue whether this salty booze mixture helped preserve teeth or just numbed the brain enough to ignore the pain. A gull squawks overhead, as if voicing your private thoughts. You look up, momentarily jealous of its freedom to fly far beyond these crowded decks and pungent experiments in oral care. You imagine the gull dropping a mint leaf from the sky like a divine gift, though you're quickly snapped back to reality by the cook shouting about breakfast. Today's meal: hardtack, salted fish, and a side of smirks from the cook. You bite down on the tough biscuit, instantly reminded why sailors invested so much effort in keeping their few remaining teeth. You recall an older sailor's tale of a shipmate who lost all his teeth to scurvy and had to survive on fish broth and watery gruel. You grind the thought away with another firm chew on your stick. A young deckhand stumbles past, sporting a grin with an ominous gap where a molar used to be. He brags that the sea took it as payment for safe passage, a superstition common among sailors who considered each lost tooth a charm against storms. You try to hide your grimace, silently promising your remaining teeth that you'll do your best to protect them, even if it means more vinegar rinses and charcoal scrubs. The morning wind stiffens the sails, carrying faint echoes of laughter and groans from men discovering new dental injuries. You lean into the breeze, feeling it wrap around you like a cold blanket. The deck tilts slightly, a gentle rock that could lull you into a nap if not for the sharp sting of salt in your nostrils. As you shuffle back to your post, you rub your teeth with a knotted rag dipped in ash, your own small act of defiance against decay. The ash leaves a chalky film on your tongue, but you almost enjoy it now, the same way someone might find comfort in an old, tattered blanket. Historians still argue whether these methods prolonged sailors' dental health or simply delayed the inevitable toothless grin of old age. But for now, under this pale sky, every scrape and rinse feels like a small victory, a whispered promise that maybe you'll get to keep one more tooth for just a few more sunsets. Your eyes close briefly, soothed by the lull of the sea, the rhythmic creak of the rigging, and the gentle heartbeat of the waves below. You drift into a half-dream, imagining a world where mint grows wild on deck and sailors greet each sunrise with sparkling, fresh-smelling smiles. As the ship slides forward, you breathe out a long, steady sigh. You feel a quiet pride swell in your chest, proof that no matter how salty, smoky, or splintery, you're doing your best to hold on to those stubborn ivory treasures, one chew stick at a time. The sun has climbed higher now, burning away the morning fog like a torch pressed to parchment. You shuffle along the deck, feeling the heat collect in the folds of your linen shirt. Around you, sailors begin their midday routines, some haul lines, some mend sails, and a few gather in small groups to compare tooth-cleaning tactics as if they were discussing prized sword techniques. One sailor, a grizzled veteran with tattoos curling around his arms like ivy, proudly displays a peculiar wooden toothpick. It's carved from orange tree twigs, imported long ago by a Portuguese merchant. He claims it smells sweet and tastes better than rat jerky, which is not exactly a ringing endorsement. Historians still argue whether these twigs were truly effective or just a fancy excuse to avoid the harsher scrubbing methods. Nearby, another man, a wiry fellow missing 3 front teeth, insists on chewing licorice root. He swears it cleans his teeth, freshens his breath, and wards off shipboard curses. You take a sniff and instantly recoil. It smells like a blend of cough syrup and rain-soaked hay. Nevertheless, he munches away with a blissful look that suggests he's in a different world altogether. You reach for your own chew stick, now whittled down to a pitiful nub. The taste of salt and old wood mixes in your mouth, a reminder of countless waves and sleepless nights. You can almost hear your gums whispering, "Thank you, I think," as you roll the stick across your molars. At the edge of the deck, a young deckhand experiments with a mixture of vinegar and ashes, swirling it around his mouth like he's savoring a fine wine. He gags dramatically, then spits it out overboard. You try not to laugh, but a small snort escapes, and he glares at you as though you've just insulted his mother's stew. A moment later, he grins, revealing surprisingly white teeth. Maybe there's something to his odd concoction after all. Historians still argue whether vinegar was a help or a hindrance to dental care at sea, but for this young sailor, it's a badge of bravery, or perhaps sheer desperation. Your thoughts drift to shore-leave fantasies, sprawling marketplaces selling fragrant soaps and mint pastes, sweet pastries that don't double as dental weapons, and people who casually rinse with rosewater instead of brine and ashes. The image flickers like a lantern in the dark, distant but oddly comforting. A shout from above breaks your reverie. A lookout has spotted a distant sail. The deck bursts into an anxious hum, but you stay focused on your own quiet mission, scraping another layer of plaque away with a scrap of linen. One of your crewmates jokes that you look like an alchemist hunting for the philosopher's stone in your own mouth. Your cheeks flush, and you laugh, half in embarrassment and half in shared amusement. In that moment, you realize that these strange routines are more than hygiene, they're acts of tiny rebellion against the ocean's constant attempts to reduce you to salt and bone. You imagine the ocean itself as a giant toothless creature, its endless waves like a gumming jaw, trying to grind sailors down to the last nub of humanity. But each vinegar rinse, each awkward chew stick session, each salt and charcoal gargle is a small defiance, a way to say, not today, see. The midday sun gleams off the brass fittings, turning the deck into a shimmering, oven-like trap. Sweat drips into your mouth, stinging your gums where your makeshift toothbrush scraped too hard earlier. You grimace but press on, determined to finish the day's ritual. A friend hands you a scrap of dried sage he claims was smuggled from a monastery. You try chewing it, the flavor is earthy and bitter, like gnawing on an old prayer book. Still, it offers a momentary freshness that makes you feel almost civilized, almost. Historians still argue whether these herbal solutions actually helped prevent tooth decay or simply made sailors feel less like floating barnacles. But as you stand under the punishing sun, you decide it doesn't really matter. Belief itself can be a powerful medicine when you're adrift for months on end. You lean back against a coil of rope, closing your eyes, and feel the ship breathe beneath you. The pitch and roll of the sea, the rhythmic creak of timbers, and the occasional gull cry fuse into a lullaby. You suck thoughtfully on your sage stem, imagining a future where you still have most of your teeth, and maybe, just maybe, a few new stories to tell. The moment passes as a bell clangs for the next duty watch. You tuck your precious scraps of sage and linen away, ready to face the rest of the day with the slightly improved breath of a man who believes in small miracles. The afternoon heat settles over the deck like a heavy blanket you can't shake off. You stretch your arms and peer around, watching as a few of your fellow sailors trade cleaning tricks the way nobles might swap silk patterns at a banquet. One is brandishing a frayed horsehair brush tied to a twig, an experimental tooth broom, he calls it, with the proud flair of someone introducing a fine wine. You lean closer, curious despite the sweat stinging your eyes. The bristles look like something a cat dragged in and forgot, but he claims it scrapes off tar-like buildup better than any chew stick. Historians still argue whether these early brushes were inspired by Chinese designs or just wild improvisations by desperate sailors trying to avoid gum rot. The man next to him, a tall fellow with cheeks burned red from sun and salt, prefers rubbing crushed coral powder on his teeth. You wince as he grinds the gritty paste along his molars, the sound like pebbles rolling down a tin roof during a storm. He spits overboard, then smiles broadly, revealing teeth that look, well, slightly less green than before. Meanwhile, an older deckhand, whose breath could peel barnacles off the hull, is fiercely loyal to his seaweed-chewing habit. He insists it not only freshens the mouth but also keeps the mind sharp enough to spot distant reefs. You try a strand yourself and instantly regret it. It tastes like old socks soaked in fish broth. You nod politely, trying not to gag, and he beams as though he's shared a sacred family secret. Around you, sailors mock each other's choices, laughing and teasing to hide their deeper fears of scurvy and decay. You realize this is more than hygiene, it's ritual, a small spark of humanity clung to amidst the endless horizon. You fiddle with a bit of cloth soaked in lemon juice, gifted by a passing merchant ship weeks ago. Its tart sting jolts you awake more than a stiff breeze. You run it along your teeth and gums, wincing at tender spots. Some historians still argue whether citrus saved more teeth or just scalded the tongue into a temporary sense of cleanliness. A particularly adventurous cook once tried mixing vinegar, salt, and crushed pepper into a tooth scrub. The result? A frothy, lava-like paste that left half the crew begging for mercy and the other half boasting about their ironclad gums. You can't decide whether they're brave or simply out of their minds. A shout from the crow's nest draws your gaze upward, a pod of dolphins is following the ship. You move toward the rail to watch them leap and play, their sleek bodies shimmering under the afternoon sun. For a moment, all thoughts of dental torture slip away. You catch yourself smiling, a big, uninhibited grin, even though you're painfully aware of every sore spot in your mouth. The dolphins vanish as quickly as they appeared, leaving you with only the slap of waves and the creak of wood. You turn back and notice a young sailor trying to improve his oral armor by sucking on cloves. He looks serious, almost scholarly, as if pondering the meaning of life through a single spice bud. You join him, and though the cloves burn your tongue, they leave a faint sweetness you find oddly comforting. Historians still argue whether clove was truly an effective antiseptic or just another superstition passed down by spice traders and wandering monks. Yet here, far from land, every little ritual feels as valid as the stars you navigate by. The deck is awash in late afternoon glow now, and you sense the shift in energy, the quiet hum before evening chores take over. You carefully wrap up your cloth and chew sticks, sliding them into a small pouch tied at your waist. You glance around, noticing the camaraderie despite the hardships, the shared jokes, the playful shoulder bumps, the quiet moments when a sailor stares out to sea, lost in thought. You lean against the railing again, letting the wind tangle your hair and cool your salt-sticky skin. The endless blue stretches ahead, a giant blank page waiting for new stories. Even with your sore gums and questionable breath, you feel strangely alive, bonded to this rough, floating world by shared struggles and stinging lemon scrubs. A bell clangs somewhere behind you, announcing yet another small shift in the day's rhythm. You sigh, adjust your pouch, and prepare to trudge back into duty, already planning the next round of citrus and clove experiments. Tonight, as you drift off on your rough hammock, maybe you'll dream of lush citrus orchards, or a future where toothbrushes arrive neatly packed in tiny boxes rather than grown on trees or scraped from coral. But for now, you take one last breath of sea air, and for a fleeting second, you taste something like victory, or at least, a slightly less fishy aftertaste. The evening descends like a slow, ink-black curtain across the deck. You trudge toward the galley, your mouth still tingling from the day's various cleaning experiments. In the dimming light, a few sailors gather to exchange their latest oral hygiene concoctions like alchemists trading secret elixirs. One guy boasts of a magic paste made from ground charcoal mixed with seawater, which he claims can whiten teeth to mermaid standards. You can't help but snort at that, as if mermaids would care about human smiles while dragging sailors into the depths. Charcoal, of course, was a known method even among land dwellers back then. Historians still argue whether it truly cleaned teeth or just gave sailors a momentary illusion of cleanliness. But on these endless ocean journeys, illusions were sometimes all you had to cling to. Nearby, another fellow grinds a mixture of ashes and clam shells, stirring it with the end of a knife. You lean closer and realize he's chanting something under his breath, a half-prayer, half-sea shanty to ward off mouth demons. You stifle a giggle, knowing he's deadly serious. The salty paste smells like a bonfire that got lost in a fish market. He grins at you with ash-streaked teeth, clearly convinced he's onto something revolutionary. As you step further into the galley, the cook slaps a hand on your back and offers you a bite of dried squid. You chew slowly, feeling each sinewy fiber cling to your teeth like barnacles on a hull. The chewiness might be irritating, but many sailors swear that it polishes their teeth better than any scrub. You imagine modern dentists collectively fainting at the thought. Meanwhile, a young sailor in the corner is sketching a toothbrush idea on a scrap of parchment. He's fashioned a bristle head from porcupine quills, a design that looks more like a medieval torture device than a hygiene tool. You watch him proudly wave it about like an inventor at a royal fair. Historians still argue whether such odd prototypes ever truly existed or whether they were born from sleep-deprived minds and too much grog. Across the table, an old sea dog recalls a Chinese merchant who once gave him a bamboo brush with stiff bristles. You picture it, a sleek handle, tiny bristles standing proud like soldiers at roll call. You nearly sigh with envy at the thought of such refined dental luxury. Compared to your lemon-soaked rag, it sounds like a gift from the heavens. As the ship rocks gently, you spot another man dipping a piece of linen into vinegar and ash, then twisting it around his finger to scrub his gums. His face contorts with every twist, a dance of pain and perseverance that somehow draws a small crowd. A few sailors start taking bets on how long he'll last before tossing the linen overboard in disgust. You lean against a barrel, your sides shaking from silent laughter. A bell clangs above deck, signaling the approach of night duties. You can hear the soft slap of waves and the far-off whistle of the wind. You rise, stepping back into the moonlit passageway, feeling the floor sway beneath you. The smell of the sea fills your nose, briny, alive, as if it's plotting to swallow the ship whole. You clutch your pouch of tooth-cleaning treasures, each object a weird memento of this floating carnival. Historians still argue whether sailors' dedication to dental rituals was genuine concern or just another way to stave off boredom on months-long voyages. Watching your shipmates tonight, you're convinced it's both. You feel oddly grateful for their quirky attempts to stay human, to anchor themselves in some semblance of self-care amidst the chaos of endless horizons. You lean against the railing once more, your eyes squinting at the stars above. They glint like scattered salt crystals, silent companions to your late-night reflections. Somewhere below deck, a sailor curses at his seaweed toothpaste, another one hums to a crusty old tune while wielding his bristle stick. You smile, a little amused, a little melancholic. Your teeth ache in places you didn't even know existed, but there's a peculiar sense of accomplishment, like you've been initiated into a secret club of ocean-bound oral warriors. You run your tongue along the edges, feeling the rough spots and cleaner patches, wondering how many of them will survive the next moon cycle. You push off the railing, stretching your arms wide, and inhale the sharp night air. You hear laughter below deck, footsteps above, and somewhere a low, comforting hum, the ship's heartbeat echoing through every plank and rope. You glance down at your cloth, lemon scrap, and ashen paste, suddenly aware of the simple, resilient beauty in these makeshift solutions. And so, under the moon's soft watch, you step back toward your hammock, carrying stories on your tongue, literally and figuratively, ready to share in tomorrow's grand dental experiments. For now, though, you simply breathe, chew a final clove, and let the sea cradle you into another night afloat. You climb down into the belly of the ship, your hands trailing along the rough wood as you descend. The air grows heavier here, thick with the scent of salted meat, wet rope, and something that vaguely reminds you of old cheese left on a windowsill. You pause to scratch an itch on your shoulder, trying not to think about what other critters might be sharing the hold with you tonight. In the flickering lantern light, you see a circle of sailors huddled like conspirators. Tonight's topic of choice? A heated debate over whether rubbing the teeth with crushed peppercorns would stop tooth worms. You nearly choke on your own breath, tooth worms. Historians still argue whether people truly believed in these squirmy invaders or whether it was a metaphor gone terribly wrong. Regardless, it seems pepper was believed to banish them to the deepest depths of the ocean. A lanky sailor named Wren, his mouth permanently puckered from a lifetime of lemon rations, stands up to demonstrate. He grinds peppercorns between two rusted knives, makes a grim paste, and proceeds to rub it along his gums. His eyes water immediately, and he lets out a noise so strange it might summon sea spirits. The others cheer him on, slapping barrels and stomping feet. You can't help but think that if the worms were real, they definitely just packed their bags and left. Near the back, a gray-bearded old-timer pulls out a tiny, brittle feather. You squint closer and realize he's using it like a dental pick, teasing out bits of dried fish from between his teeth. You flinch just watching, imagining that feather snap mid-procedure and get lost forever in some dark crevice of his gums. He insists this technique was passed down from a long line of pirate dentists, a phrase that's equal parts hilarious and horrifying. Historians still argue whether these so-called pirate dentists ever existed or whether they were born from sailor legends mixed with too many rum-soaked evenings. But the idea of a sea-based dental guild does make for a delightfully silly mental image. The sound of waves slapping against the hull soothes your mind, even as the muffled laughter and clanging continue around you. Someone starts a shanty about the toothless lass of Galway, and soon everyone is singing, badly, in 10 different keys. You sway along, your feet tapping gently on the planks, a sleepy smile spreading across your face. Your mind drifts to the idea of fresh water and clean linen sheets, two luxuries so distant they might as well belong to another universe. You think about how sailors used to crave soft bread and fresh greens to combat scurvy, but when it came to dental hygiene, they leaned toward anything sharp, acidic, or briny. Vinegar rinses, lemon rubs, and spicy root pastes were all the rage, if you could find them. There's something both desperate and endearing about it, like children building forts out of driftwood. A young boy, probably no older than 15, sits cross-legged in the corner. He's fashioning what looks like a mouthguard from wax scraps and cloth strips. You watch him closely as he explains to the others that wearing it overnight would keep the teeth from running away, a superstition he learned from his grandmother. You try not to burst into laughter, but the earnestness on his face is so pure it melts your heart a little. As the conversation winds down, the men settle into their hammocks, still chuckling and tossing jabs about each other's breath. You find your own spot, a sagging canvas strung up near the wall. You wrap yourself tight, the way a cinnamon roll holds its filling, and close your eyes. Above, you can hear the faint echo of boots on deck, maybe the watch shifting or someone too nervous to sleep. The ship creaks and moans like an old storyteller recounting impossible tales. You smile to yourself, thinking about the day's culinary and dental experiments, each one a bizarre act of resilience against the waves and the unknown. Historians still argue whether these communal nighttime gatherings, part dental workshop, part stand-up comedy show, were genuine medical efforts or just a much-needed break from the endless monotony of sea life. Tonight, at least, they felt like an absurd but precious ritual, one that made the floating world a little less lonely. Your tongue still tingles with pepper heat, and your gums might hate you tomorrow, but for now, you feel oddly proud. You've become part of a centuries-old tradition of making do with whatever scraps the world tosses your way. You drift into semi-consciousness, hearing ghostly strains of a shanty mixed with the hush of the ocean breeze. You might not wake up with minty fresh breath, but you'll wake up with stories clinging to your teeth like barnacles on a hull. And in this drifting, creaking cradle, that feels just right, morning light peeks through the cracks in the wooden hull, casting wobbly golden stripes across your face. You roll over, disoriented by the faint echo of seagulls and the steady hush of waves. Your jaw feels as though it's been massaged by an octopus, which, considering last night's pepper experiment, isn't too far from the truth. You crawl out of your hammock like a half-cooked noodle and shuffle toward the upper deck. The smell of salted fish and boiled oats wafts through the air, mingling with a faint stench of yesterday's garlic tooth rub. The sailors are already up, stretching, spitting into the sea, and showing off their proud, if slightly yellow, grins. Today's breakfast is a somber affair. Hardtack, sometimes called molar breakers for obvious reasons, dominates the morning spread. You crack a piece between your fingers, wondering if your teeth will file for retirement before this voyage ends. Some sailors claim to soften the hardtack by dipping it into coffee or broth. Others, with more patience or less dental fear, gnaw it dry like determined goats. Historians still argue whether sailors genuinely enjoyed hardtack or simply learned to fake enthusiasm as a survival tactic. Near the mast, you spot a barrel labeled tooth-friendly herbs. A few sailors rummage inside, pulling out sprigs of mint, sage, and sometimes rosemary. One man chews mint leaves with exaggerated enthusiasm, swearing it wards off deck breath. You giggle, but can't help plucking a leaf for yourself. The faint sweetness is oddly comforting, like a ghost of toothpaste from a future century. A skinny cook named Tom, wearing a hat that looks like it was sewn by a particularly clumsy octopus, starts explaining his secret remedy, powdered charcoal mixed with rainwater. He claims it not only cleans your teeth but makes them shine like moonlight on a calm sea. You try it. Spoiler, they do not shine, but your tongue now resembles an ink spill. Historians still argue whether charcoal was actually popular or if sailors like Tom just enjoyed turning their mouths into miniature haunted houses. Either way, Tom beams with pride, convinced he's a visionary of sea-based dental care. As you lean on the railing, chewing your mint and contemplating your newly inked tongue, a breeze hits your face. You glance at the horizon, a shimmering band between sea and sky. The sun glints off the waves, casting little sparkles that dance like tiny fairies, or so you imagine, in your half-awake state. A grizzled old sailor named Miro starts telling a story about a ship that supposedly carried a barrel of pure honey as a gift for a distant king. According to Miro, sailors used to dip twigs in that honey and scrub their teeth for a sweet-smelling breath. You laugh so hard you nearly drop your mint. The idea of honey-covered smiles on a storm-battered deck feels like something from a pirate rom-com. Historians still argue whether honey sticks were an actual practice or simply an amusing seafarer legend meant to sweeten the dreary mornings. Either way, it sounds better than gnawing on salted ropes or pepper paste. The deck grows louder as chores begin, coiling ropes, scrubbing planks, and patching sails. You join in reluctantly, half dreaming about a cozy feather bed and a warm bath. The salty wind tugs at your hair, the sun warms your back, and your jaw still throbs from last night's pepper challenge. A young deckhand scampers by holding a bundle of dried kelp, claiming it works as sea floss. You raise an eyebrow but decide to give it a cautious try. As you slide the slippery frond between your teeth, it feels like a damp sea monster is giving you a polite dental checkup. It's surprisingly refreshing, in a "why am I doing this" sort of way. The day wears on with the gentle rhythm of waves, squeaking ropes, and distant caws. Your new kelp floss hangs from your pocket like a soggy bookmark, a badge of questionable bravery. You consider starting a new shipboard trend, kelp chic, but suspect you'd be your only follower. As the sun climbs high, a warm, lazy drowsiness starts to wrap around you like an old woolen cloak. You watch the horizon, squinting at the endless parade of shimmering blues and silvers, and feel yourself drifting into a half-dream where mint sprigs dance a waltz with kelp ribbons. Historians still argue whether these daily tooth adventures bonded crews together or simply offered something to gossip about during long, horizonless days. Either way, today's experiments make you feel oddly connected, not just to these scrappy sailors but to a long, unbroken chain of humans trying to fight nature's stubborn grip on our smiles. You lean back, letting the deck creak beneath you, and imagine a future where toothbrushes aren't made from sticks, ropes, or mysterious herbs. A future with gentle bristles and minty foams that promise Arctic freshness instead of barnacle bitterness. But for now, your world is kelp, pepper, and brave laughter echoing across a sunlit sea. Evening creeps in, a hush settles over the deck. You stretch your arms, feeling every knot in your shoulders from hauling ropes and dodging waves all day. The ocean breeze turns cooler, brushing against your cheeks like a ghostly lullaby. Your kelp floss hangs forgotten by your side, now resembling a very sad seaweed noodle. A sailor named Jiro, known for carving tiny animals out of driftwood, invites you to a small gathering by a lantern. Tonight's topic? The ultimate sailor flex, who has the cleanest teeth on board. You roll your eyes but wander over anyway. After all, what else do you have to do besides consider whether your jaw can survive another hardtack dinner? The sailors compare their various tooth wands, a delightful misnomer for sticks, bones, and bits of rope frayed on purpose. Jiro shows off his smooth, whittled twig from a willow branch, claiming it whispers secrets to the gums. You can't help but imagine a tiny fairy whispering dental affirmations each morning. Historians still argue whether willow twigs were chosen for their supposed medicinal qualities or simply because they were the nearest thing that wasn't a seagull. A burly sailor named Klaus reveals a trick involving dried fish bones. He scrapes his teeth gently and claims it sharpens his bite for shark wrestling. You snort so loudly that two nearby sailors jump. Of course, no one on this ship has wrestled sharks, but the imagery sticks with you, circling your mind like a small, goofy dolphin. Nearby, someone brings out a jar of ashes from the cooking fire. You stare as they dip their tooth sticks in the ashy powder, swirling it around with reverence as if performing a ritual from a secret sea cult. They say the ashes help whiten teeth and confuse sea demons. Historians still argue whether the practice had any actual cleaning effect or was purely a spiritual ward against imaginary ocean goblins. You give it a try. The charcoal ash tastes like burnt toast left on a grill during a thunderstorm, but it leaves your mouth feeling oddly fresh, or maybe just numb. A sailor next to you chimes in, takes the barnacles right off, and bursts into wheezy laughter. You try to smile but end up coughing, spitting black specks onto the deck. As lantern light flickers, you realize these gatherings aren't really about dental hygiene. They're a moment of warmth in the cold monotony of the sea, a chance to laugh at each other's absurd tricks, and to feel human in a place that often feels like floating purgatory. A young deckhand named Aiko, cheeks sunburnt and eyes bright with curiosity, offers you a half-dried orange peel. She claims it's a rare treasure from the last port and that gnawing it will make your breath sing like a spring breeze. You bite cautiously. The sour tang jolts you so thoroughly that you nearly topple backward. You manage a grateful grin as tears prick your eyes. Historians still argue whether orange peels were truly used for dental care or simply for scurvy prevention, but either way, tonight it feels like magic. Someone pulls out a battered lute and starts strumming a slow, meandering tune that drifts up into the star-pricked sky. The salt air hums softly, the gentle lap of waves forming an endless percussion beneath the music. You lean against a crate, letting the vibrations lull you into a sweet haze. The ship creaks with every small movement, almost as if it's sighing alongside you. You glance around at your fellow sailors, each person busy with their own small rituals, polishing wooden teeth sticks, braiding ropes, or humming along to the lute. Despite your pepper paste fiasco and the haunting charcoal smile, you feel a strange sense of community, as though you've been stitched into this bobbing tapestry of lives and half-lives. Tonight, you feel closer to the long history of sailors than ever. You picture countless others over centuries, gnawing twigs under moonlight, swapping tall tales about sea monsters and mermaids with minty breath or smoky ash tongues. Historians still argue whether these nighttime gatherings were a universal part of maritime culture or unique quirks that developed on certain ships. Either way, tonight it feels like an age-old ritual you're privileged to join. As the last chord of the lute fades, a yawn stretches across your face so wide it feels like your jaw might sail away on its own. Someone pats your shoulder and offers a soft blanket that smells faintly of kelp and sunshine. You pull it around you, nestling into the wooden deck. You close your eyes, tasting faint orange zest on your tongue and imagining fairies whispering secrets to your gums. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the moon rises, casting silver ripples across the vast, quiet sea. Tomorrow, there will be more dental experiments, more laughter, and more oddball remedies waiting. But for now, you drift gently, rocked by the ship and serenaded by memories of mint, ash, and orange peels. By dawn, the ocean blushes with pale pink light, and you feel the ship's slow, comforting sway under your blanket. The kelp floss you abandoned last night is now stuck to the deck, flapping softly like a sad sea flag. You stretch and realize your jaw feels surprisingly tingly. Perhaps it's the leftover orange peel magic, or maybe it's the ash ritual still working its sooty wonders. You wander to the galley in search of breakfast and instead find an old sailor named Tomas painstakingly carving what appears to be a new type of toothbrush. His hands are steady despite the constant motion of the ship. He explains in a hushed voice, as if he's sharing forbidden treasure maps, that he's using bristles from a pig's neck tied onto a bone handle. You stare at him, horrified and fascinated. Pig bristles? Really? Historians still argue whether these early pig bristle brushes were widely used among sailors or if they were an eccentric invention for those who had a bit too much time between storms. Tomas insists they're excellent for getting sea biscuit crumbs out of molars, though you can't help picturing piglets squealing in the background every time he brushes. Meanwhile, a younger sailor is busy stirring a dark paste in a small jar. It turns out to be a concoction of soot, salt, and crushed herbs, a pirate's version of toothpaste, if you will. The taste? According to him, like licking a chimney after a barbecue. You grimace, but he swears by its power to polish even the dingiest molars. Nearby, a trio of sailors are locked in a debate over which method of tooth scrubbing is truly superior. One favors chewing on guava twigs picked up from tropical ports, another swears by rubbing sage leaves directly on the gums, and the last insists that a good, vigorous rinse with salty seawater beats them all. You can't help but laugh. It's like an impromptu infomercial on the high seas. Historians still argue whether guava twigs were practical imports or simply luxury items to show off during late-night deck bragging sessions. You try each method in turn, feeling like a medieval cooking show contestant forced to sample increasingly questionable ingredients. The guava twig has a sweet, almost refreshing taste, while the sage leaf feels more like a mouth massage than a real cleaning. And that seawater rinse? Let's just say you nearly spit overboard, coughing and sputtering like a startled seal. Through all the grimacing and gagging, you notice something beautiful. These sailors have invented entire tooth care rituals in the middle of nowhere, using whatever they can scavenge or imagine. Despite the lack of modern tools, they somehow manage to preserve a sense of humor and camaraderie. You remember the willow stick whispering secrets. Maybe each toothbrush is a tiny talisman against the ocean's loneliness. Tomas offers you a pig bristle brush to keep. You take it hesitantly, imagining it might sprout a tiny tail overnight. You give it a cautious swirl in your mouth, and, to your astonishment, it feels surprisingly effective. You give Tomas a thumbs up, and he laughs so hard his bristle pot nearly tips into the sea. A salty breeze whips across the deck, and you lean against the rail, gazing at the endless horizon. The sun now sparkles like scattered coins across the water, and you catch your reflection in a metal bucket, hair windswept, cheeks sunburned, and teeth, well, as clean as they've been in weeks. A sudden shout calls your attention. A sailor has spotted dolphins trailing the ship, leaping and twirling in the waves. You can't help but feel these creatures are showing off for your newly polished smile. You wave to them with exaggerated enthusiasm, half expecting them to grin back and flash some kelp floss of their own. Back on deck, someone starts humming a folk tune about mermaids offering magical sea salt mouthwash. You join in, adding a silly verse about a squid that moonlights as a dentist. The others chime in with laughter and off-key harmonies, filling the ship with echoes of warmth and playfulness. Historians still argue whether sea shanties about dental hygiene were ever really sung, but you'd bet your last orange peel that someone, somewhere, once hummed a tune just like this. As the day slides onward, your teeth feel stronger, your gums tingle with the strange experiments, and your spirit feels lighter than it has in days. The ship sails on, leaving foamy trails behind like brush strokes across a blue canvas. You realize these small, odd rituals are not just about keeping your mouth in working order, they're tiny acts of defiance against the vast, indifferent sea. You think back to all the makeshift tools, pig bristles, guava twigs, charred ashes. Despite their absurdity, each is a testament to human creativity, to finding comfort and care even in the most unexpected places. And maybe, just maybe, those dolphins did appreciate your sparkling grin after all. As the evening breeze curls around you, you wrap your blanket tighter and imagine the next experimental toothpaste someone will concoct tomorrow. Perhaps crab shell powder or octopus ink rinse? The possibilities are as endless as the waves. The golden sun finally dips beneath the edge of the sea, leaving you with a cool breeze and a sky full of stars so bright they almost seem to giggle. You stand on deck, pig bristle toothbrush still in your hand, feeling oddly proud of your maritime dental journey. A few sailors gather around a flickering lantern, sharing stories about the oddest things they've ever stuck in their mouths, aside from salty fish heads and questionable grog. One old deckhand named Jeffrey claims he once used a feather quill as a toothpick during a supply shortage. He waves his hands wildly, reenacting the dramatic poking and gagging noises. Historians still argue whether feather toothpicks were actually used or if Jeffrey just wanted to out-weird everyone else that evening. Nearby, a young sailor named Minato slices open a lime and carefully rubs it on his teeth. You watch in mild horror as he winces and mutters something about vitamin C armor. According to him, the sour sting prevents scurvy and scares away evil deck spirits. You remind yourself to avoid sharing a cabin with him tonight, just in case he starts chanting mid-sleep. A barrel of half-fermented apples rolls across the deck, bumping into your foot. One sailor explains they sometimes chewed apple bark or citrus peels for fresh breath before port dates. You imagine them strutting down the gangplank with citrus peel smiles, winking at startled market vendors. Historians still argue whether those port romances were truly sparked by sweet breath or simply by sailors finally stepping onto solid ground. Further along the rail, two sailors are comparing bits of driftwood, each shaped into makeshift tooth scrubbers. One proudly displays a driftwood handle polished so smooth it gleams under moonlight. The other boasts a driftwood piece still embedded with barnacles for natural exfoliation. You nearly choke on your own giggle at that image, barnacle fresh toothpaste, the latest sea spa sensation. Despite the absurdity, there's a shared sense of pride in these odd dental inventions. You realize these men are living examples of improvisation, finding laughter in the tiniest corners of survival. Even in a world where a mouthful of teeth could mean life or death, they manage to make it a group sport. You wander to the stern, feeling the gentle thrum of the ship beneath your feet. A lantern flickers, and someone starts sketching diagrams on a scrap of parchment, proposing the ultimate sea toothbrush, a contraption involving a seagull feather, shark teeth, and a rope pulley system. You nearly double over laughing at the mental image of someone yanking on a pulley to floss. Another sailor appears with a small pot of honey. With an exaggerated bow, he offers you a dab to seal your gums against sea demons. You dip a finger, taste the sweetness, and imagine it gluing your spirit together for the next wave of salty trials. Historians still argue whether honey was used more as a practical antiseptic or simply a desperate sweet fix. You can't help but think about all the odd things that must have ended up in sailors' mouths over the centuries: squid ink soups, mystery fish stews, and dubious rum cocktails. It's almost comforting to know that through all these culinary crimes, someone still thought to scrub their teeth. Looking up at the star-speckled sky, you feel a wave of gratitude wash over you like the ship's gentle roll. The North Star blinks knowingly, perhaps approving of your now shockingly minty, or at least citrusy, breath. You take a slow, salty inhale and feel strangely triumphant. You catch sight of Tomas again, carefully wrapping his pig bristle toothbrush in a bit of cloth as if it were a sacred relic. You think back to that first moment you saw him carving away, and you realize how every small detail on this ship tells a story. Even a toothbrush is a testament to resourcefulness and silent battles against decay. Someone nearby starts humming an old sea shanty about the bristle bride of Brighton Pier, probably an invention born from too much rum and too few teeth. You join the chorus, adding a verse about the driftwood dentist and his barnacle assistants. The moon listens, glowing softly above, as if winking at your nonsense poetry. A nearby dolphin surfaces with a quick splash, as though applauding your dental dedication. You give it a lazy salute and wonder if dolphins ever chew kelp floss under moonlight. Maybe they even have a gossip circle about how humans brush their teeth with sticks and pig hair. The ship creaks and sighs as you drift into a half-dream state. Your tongue runs absent-mindedly over your surprisingly clean teeth. The salty breeze wraps around you like a storybook cloak, filled with barnacle jokes and citrus peels. You feel a rare, deep calm. Tomorrow, new mouth-cleaning experiments will surely emerge, perhaps involving squid beaks or crushed coral. But for tonight, you let your mind float among the stars and ship ropes, savoring the sweetness of honey and the echo of your laughter on the waves. As the lantern light flickers low and the ship rocks gently, you find yourself retreating toward your hammock, pig bristle toothbrush safely tucked into a little pouch at your hip like some enchanted amulet. You imagine if sailors had Instagram, they'd be showing off toothbrush selfies with hashtags like #SaltLifeSmile or #BarnacleWhitening_Challenge. Historians still argue whether sailors really had enough free time to obsess over oral selfies, or if this is just your sleep-starved mind drifting into nonsense. You swing into the hammock, the canvas hugging your body like a giant moth cocoon. The ocean hums below you, a never-ending lullaby of waves kissing the hull. From the deck above, you hear a muffled argument over whose teeth sparkle more under moonlight, Tomas or Minato. You suppress a laugh that nearly makes your hammock sway too far. A faint clinking sound echoes in the night. It's Jeffrey again, the feather quill toothpick guy, now carving what he claims will be the first fully organic mouth harp. Apparently, he's planning to serenade the mermaids and win their kelp salads as tribute. You glance up at the stars, certain that somewhere, a historian is rolling their eyes and scribbling notes for a future lecture on maritime music and dental delusions. Your fingers play absently with the edge of the hammock as you remember the sailor's constant battle against scurvy. Imagine gnawing on citrus peels, chasing away vitamin deficiencies, all while stashing away your precious pig bristles like treasure. You sense the odd pride in the smallest comforts, whether it's a patch of clean enamel or a fleeting taste of something sweet. From another corner of the deck, you catch snippets of a shanty about a ghost ship whose crew brushed their teeth with ghostly moonbeams. The melody drifts into the night, mixing with the creak of the ship and the salty scent of the sea. You hum along softly, your eyelids growing heavier with each gentle sway of the hammock. Tomas strolls past, proudly brandishing his bristle brush and humming his own off-key verse, "Bristles by dawn, barnacles begone." You can't help but grin, even though you're barely conscious now. Historians still argue whether these songs helped pass time or secretly carried messages about supplies and hidden stashes of citrus. Above, the sails billow and snap, pulling the ship toward tomorrow's horizon. Somewhere in the shadows, a sailor is probably inventing a new paste using seaweed and squid ink, the next great artisanal sea toothpaste, perhaps with bonus minerals. The mere thought of the briny concoction almost makes you gag, but also makes you appreciate how fiercely human beings cling to ritual, even if it involves a sticky kelp mouth disaster. The stars shimmer like 1,000 polished teeth, each one a little promise of morning. You wonder if the moon is judging you and your new bristle friends from above, perhaps muttering to Venus about those odd humans who comb their gums under starlight. A cold breeze slips across the deck, wrapping around you like a mischievous sea spirit tugging at your blanket. You snuggle deeper into the hammock, toes curling against the canvas as though gripping the last warmth of the day. You breathe in the salt, the rope, the faint tang of citrus peel still stuck on your thumb. You remember the sailor who claimed his grandmother taught him to rinse his mouth with seawater every morning for spiritual cleansing. Historians still argue whether that was a genuine spiritual ritual or just a practical way to rinse out yesterday's fish stew. Either way, you can almost hear Grandma's ghostly voice whispering, "Don't forget behind the molars." A lone lantern remains burning above, casting sleepy golden circles on the deck planks. You watch its glow blur and shift with each gentle swing of your hammock. Every creak, every distant splash, each gust of wind feels like a page turning in a bedtime book you didn't know you wanted. You give one final thought to your beloved bristle brush, safe and snug, a heroic companion in your quest for the world's weirdest dental stories. You wonder if future sailors might one day rediscover this tradition and boast about vintage deckside bristle brushing. Imagine the marketing slogans, "Get your seaworthy shine before breakfast." Tomorrow will bring new waves, new fishy breakfasts, and probably new dental innovations involving barnacle paste or kelp flossing circles. But for tonight, your gums are as content as your spirit, both riding a gentle tide toward the mysterious dreamlands waiting just past the horizon. With each slow exhale, your mind drifts further, merging bristles with starlight, driftwood handles with dolphin giggles. The sea whispers secrets only you and your toothbrush will ever know. By now, your hammock feels like an extension of your own body, a cozy, swaying cocoon cradling you above the ocean's endless hush. You can almost sense your toothbrush nearby, humming in its own squeaky bristle voice, congratulating you on making it through another salt-sprayed day. Historians still argue whether sailors truly developed emotional attachments to their toothbrushes or whether that's just your sleepy imagination conjuring up bedtime companions. Somewhere down the deck, a pair of sailors argue over whose breath is sweeter after their nightly brush. You hear Tomas declare he used a secret recipe, crushed mint leaves smuggled in from a passing merchant ship. Meanwhile, Jeffrey swears he's experimented with clove oil stolen from the captain's private stash. Their muffled squabble drifts into the star-soaked air, punctuated by the occasional clatter of wooden mugs and the whistle of the wind. You remember how sailors once believed in sea spirits that punished those who neglected oral hygiene. There was a rumor about a misty figure named Captain Halitosis, who would sneak into your cabin and curse your breath forever. Historians still argue whether these legends were cautionary tales or just drunken jests on moonlit nights. Your eyelids grow heavier, matching the rhythmic lap of waves against the hull. The moon above feels closer than ever, peeking between the sails, watching over your drifting thoughts. It's as if she's nodding approval at your commitment to weird dental rituals. Maybe she's even gossiping with Mars about your shiny molars. Somewhere below deck, a sailor tunes a battered lute, strumming a lullaby so slow it nearly stops time. The notes quiver in the salty air, weaving between your hammock ropes and stitching you deeper into sleep's embrace. You trace your tongue along your clean teeth, feeling that final smoothness, that oddly satisfying sense of victory. After all, in a world of splinters, barnacles, and phantom sea curses, having fresh breath might be the greatest treasure of all. Remember that sailor who once claimed he brushed with squid ink to gain the favor of sea gods? Historians still argue whether his devotion ever granted him smoother voyages, or if it only left him with a permanent black grin. Either way, you have to admire the creative confidence of these salt-blooded dental pioneers. A breeze rustles the deck sails again, and you hear the faint echo of laughter from the bow. Perhaps they're sharing ghost stories about the legendary bristle wraith, who steals toothbrushes left unattended. It's these small, slightly silly worries that weave the quiet fabric of ship life, keeping everyone just superstitious enough to check twice before dozing off. Your thoughts drift toward the horizon. Tomorrow's dawn promises another day of salt air, fish stew, tangled ropes, and possibly a new bristle innovation involving crushed coral or sea urchin spines. But that's tomorrow's mystery to solve. Tonight, you have your hammock, your gleaming teeth, and your little arsenal of sailor jokes echoing around your mind. You breathe deeply, inhaling the mix of tarred ropes, sea spray, and the faint herbal whisper from Tomas's secret mint stash. The scent knits itself into your dreams like a wool blanket, heavy and safe. As your body relaxes fully into the swaying rhythm, you realize that these moments, this shared, goofy dedication to dental hygiene, reveal a deeper truth about humans at sea, the unyielding hope to hold on to tiny comforts amid an unforgiving ocean. Historians still argue whether these small rituals truly mattered in the grand scheme of maritime history, but right now, you know they do. Each gentle brushstroke, each whispered sea legend, each shared mint leaf is a rebellion against the vastness, a gentle stand against the cold, indifferent waves. You exhale one last time, feeling your gums tingle softly, your soul a driftwood raft floating on a star-speckled sea. You settle deeper into the softness of your pillow, or perhaps imagine yourself suspended in that old, creaky sailor's hammock. Your mind begins to soften around the edges. The waves hush into a faraway lull, the deck's creaks blur into a distant, almost musical echo. You can almost hear the gentle clink of toothbrush handles being tucked away for the night, each one a tiny token of comfort in the grand expanse of the sea. Your breathing slows to match the endless rhythm of the tide, each inhale pulling in the cool, salty night air, each exhale releasing the last bits of tension still hidden in your shoulders and jaw. The stars above glimmer like polished shells, each one a silent witness to countless forgotten rituals, bristle brushes, mint leaves, hushed jokes about ghostly tooth fairies slipping between the sails. The horizon, once sharp and bright, has now melted into a soft watercolor wash of midnight blue and moon silver, as if the entire ocean is exhaling with you. Your mind drifts lazily through half-formed dreams, a sailor with a mint leaf crown, a toothbrush carved from whale bone singing you a lullaby, a captain proudly presenting a barrel of clove oil as tonight's big prize. It all shimmers and fades, leaving only the slow sway of sleep. In this gentle twilight space, you're free from storms, away from splinters and salt-stiff collars, surrounded instead by the warmth of shared stories and the soothing hush of the sea. You may feel a final flicker of curiosity about tomorrow's mysterious hygiene experiments, but even that dissolves into the quiet embrace of night. Rest easy now. Let your limbs grow heavy and warm, your mind wander in soft spirals until it finds its quiet harbor. The waves will guard you, the moon will keep watch, and your bristle buddy Toothbrush will stand ready for another day's adventure. But for now, you're exactly where you're meant to be, drifting deeper and deeper, toward the sweetest of dreams.